Hello, I'm Paul Laney, the retired sheriff from Cass County, North Dakota, and the current vice president of national sales for Turnkey Corrections.
And I'm Lauren Matthews, and I'm the current social media and content specialist for Turnkey.
And you are listening to JailTalk, and we are back for part 2 with Sergeant Jacob Schak from the Dakota County, Minnesota Sheriff's Office. In part 1, he talked about their Inmates Motivated to Change program that he manages and supervises and the success they've had with that. And today we're going to talk about how you can implement that program. Before we do that, I just want to talk to all of you out there and to all of our listeners. Here at JailTalk, we like to give shout outs when they're due, and we look at everything we do as a partnership. And as many of you know, our shows are pre-recorded. We do some live stuff and we do some release stuff when we're out at the big shows like National Sheriff's Association, at NSA, and at Western States, and some of those. But a lot of our shows are pre-recorded. And in the recent weeks, we as a country have watched events unfold in Afghanistan and seen what our heroic members of the military have had to do, and the lives that they have saved, and unfortunately the loss of life for the Marines and the soldier and the sailor at the gates of the airport in Afghanistan, in Kabul. And as a former Marine, my heart broke. And I can tell you I went through a myriad of emotions during that time frame. The good sergeant sitting beside me here is an Army veteran from a military police unit. And I think I speak for both of us when I say to all of you out there, I know there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things happening. You made a difference. You got it done. You did it right. We can't always control decisions that are made outside of our realm, but we can control the things that we did, and we can look back. And from a former Marine and a 30-year law enforcement officer to all of you, many of our ranks are veterans. And I think we all look back on that, and it got very emotional for many. All I want to say is you made a difference. You got it done. You did it right. And feel good about what we've all done to protect this country, and what we all continue to do to protect this country. God bless you all. And with that, let's move on to part 2.
Sounds good.
So, Jake, we talked in part 1 about the program and everything you do, and we were just talking even off the air about your passion for this, and how we always get into this business, whether we were in the military and what I talked about earlier in my opening, and what we do now. We want to make a difference. We want to feel fulfilled. We want to know when we come to work every day that it's not just a job. We're not just occupying space. We want to make a difference. And you guys have definitely found that with your unit. You talked about the impact you've had with inmates. You've talked about the impact you've had into the community, that you have a lot of non-returners, which is the ultimate sign of success. You don't want return business in the corrections business. Yep. You talked about the impact of the staff, and as we said, the impact to you yourself as the head of the unit. So as we have our listeners out here listening to this and having heard part 1, and if you haven't heard part 1, check out part 1, because it really does lay the foundation for this. And you might be asking yourself, okay, how do I do this? Or why do I do this? So Jake, why should they do this?
We don't have enough time to really get in depth about all of the why, but the biggest why that I can give is once you see that inmate or that human that goes through the program and the light bulb turns on and you genuinely see change happen right before your eyes, much like you would your children or your family members, when you see that happen, it triggers our own brain and our own pleasure system in our brain to be like, oh my gosh, it worked, or it's working. And then the story I shared in the first episode with Pete, when you get to see them in the community and they come back up to you and say, thank you for the investment of time, energy that you guys poured into me. And now here's what I'm doing with it all. I've got a full-time job. I'm reconnecting with my family. I haven't touched drugs or alcohol in a year and a half. Huge. It motivates me to want to do more. And as much as the Inmates Motivated to Change is for our inmate population, we briefly talked about the staff, the IMC deputies that work in there. I would say they're just as impacted. And that is a huge why for them, that they get to invest and see those results and go through those struggles, and just to see the transformation, and then to see that human in our program go from having nothing to look forward to, but then earning 2 college credits while in custody and intro to entrepreneurship, and then creating a plan to have their own painting company, and to like actually have the foundation to do that while in custody. There is no number that you can quantify to show that on a spreadsheet. That has to be told through that human story and interaction. Another why I just want to quickly touch about that I'm sure we'll get questions about later is, well, can you show me the data that says it's actually doing something? 2 years ago, we had one of our staff do a short-term study in our housing, in the Inmates Motivated Change housing unit, and they looked at the time that our inmates spent before coming into the IMC unit at our jail. They compiled all their programs they attended and all their jail incidences. So all those negative kind of interactions that happen within the jail, we track those. And so they took those numbers and then compared it to post being in the IMC unit over a 2-month period. And what we saw was over a 200% increase in programs attendance while in the IMC unit, and a 70% decrease in jail incidences. So if people need a why, there it is. If you need a clear-cut quantitative model of why, that's the why. It will help with monitoring your inmates, and it will help with the overall feel of your housing unit. It will just create that environment of change.
Well, that behavior modification alone, taking away that stress within the jail environment, that stress for your employees. I mean, it has that impact all the way through the whole pod,
yes,
I would imagine,
absolutely,
on everybody that's in there. And I think, you start talking in the business world about a 200% return on your investment. Who wouldn't jump all over that? Well, when you do the business that we do, we're not in the business of making money. We're in the business of protecting and serving. And I've said it before, protecting and serving has a very broad concept in how you protect and serve your community. And if you're returning inmates back to the community that are productive members of society and they're not returning back into the jail, are you not protecting and serving? And
absolutely.
I know those are philosophies that are out there. You know what? They're damn inmates. Throw away the key. Who cares? They don't deserve this. And maybe I can say this because I was a former sheriff. Okay, now that we're over the fact that you're a tough guy and a tough girl, and you back that up with fact, back that attitude up. And I will say this: I didn't have any problem with people being in jail. I said that in the first episode. I have no problem with people paying their debt to society. And we also know there are those out there, and I will freely acknowledge the fact there are some people who should never walk in society again.
Correct.
And we need to have room at the end for them. And there should always be room at the end for them, because there are those people that should never be in society again. And I have no problem with that. But what I love about this is that as part of the community, and there's no more part of the community than the sheriff's office. And the jail, whether you want to admit it or not, is a huge part of your community. It's that part over there in the corner of the city there, or the county, where you don't want to really admit they're there. Well, maybe let's change that philosophy, embrace that they're there, invest, and do what you guys are doing. And the best return on investment is they don't come back.
Yeah,
now you're doing your job.
The ultimate goal.
Absolutely. And I think you answered the why perfectly. And I just think, as we look at what we do and what our role in society is as protectors and servers and guardians, you found the answer. At least in the corrections environment.
Yeah, it works.
Well, based on some of the stories that you've shared, I can imagine we have quite a few listeners out there saying, yes, I want something like that in my jail. So what is the best advice you have on how they can implement something like this in their jails?
Yeah, it's got to start with your sheriff level. Once your administration, and maybe it's not your sheriff,
we kind of do got to support it.
Yeah,
we got to implement it. I agree.
It has to come from us, though, the ones that are in the jail, working there every day, saying that's something good we need to do, and then going to the administration and saying here's why, and explaining it to them. Let's try it. Let's try some form of it. It doesn't need to be the full-blown Inmates Motivated to Change program. It could be as simple as getting a cognitive-based therapy decision points kind of training to your staff, so then they can organize that and teach a select group of inmates that want to do that, and starting that small, and then track those inmates over a year maybe and see if that's any different than your normal population. But I guarantee you it will be, because the moment you invest into these participants, some of them are going to get it. It's just human nature. So start small. That's probably my biggest advice. Start small. Don't say, yep, we need to have a housing unit dedicated to it. We need to have at least 8 deputies dedicated to it. That's a pretty tall ask of any jail administration right off the bat. Start small. Plan it out a year. We're gonna introduce 2 cognitive-based therapy group sessions. After that year, then say, all right, now we have some success there. For the next year, we're gonna introduce a couple more things that may be supportive of that. More recognizance therapy, get a jail treatment program that deals with alcohol abuse and drug addiction. And then maybe on that year 2, when you start seeing that program success, now you say, all right, I think we're on to something here and we're ready to take it to the next level. Then your jail administration has had some time to digest it, think about it, work out all the details. Is it going to cost more money? The biggest question that they usually have. And then say, okay, let's do it. Let's dedicate a housing unit to it, to whatever you want to call it. IMC unit. And now once you've taken that leap of faith, you have to have someone like myself. Most likely it's going to be your programs director or your program sergeant or whoever is in that role. They have to be on board with it also, because it's going to require a lot of work on their end. And then getting dedicated deputies. Let me say it one more time. Dedicated deputies to the unit. That is typically where I've seen this model fail, is they get right here. They get to this point. They say, all right, we're going to try it. But then there's just me, like a human like me, trying to do it all. I haven't seen it work yet. Could it work for you? Maybe. I'm just telling you best practice that I've seen. Get a dedicated group of deputies that are on board also. Invest in them. Invest training in them. Invest time. A lot of the training that they need is going to be on the probation side of things. Talk with your community corrections. They're already doing the training. Hook up with them. Say, hey, can I send 2 of my correctional deputies to your case management training or your evidence-based practice training or your decision points class? Whatever it is, make that connection and invest into those deputies. Once those deputies have been invested in, that is the key to your success for holding a unit like this in your jail. Once they have the buy-in, they will do most of the work for you. And then as the program's director, you just have to keep supporting them and get them what they need to be successful. And I just had a meeting with my team last week, and literally I didn't want to do anything other than let them talk, because right now the world of corrections is very stressful, low staff, every media outlet hates law enforcement right now, I think. And so when you feel all that pressure, and then you're getting pressure from your boss to keep doing well in something, it's frustrating. And so literally I spent 3 hours just letting them talk, and we just had a good time of conversation and took away some key points of what we need to work on as a team together, and that was it. Gosh, I said a lot. Did all that digest?
It did, and your advice is solid. And one of the things that you touched on it just briefly, but I think is something that as our listeners say, okay, I really want to do this, and I don't care whether you're a 15-bed jail or a 1,500-bed jail. Yep. Those are all people, and granted, you might say, I only got 5 deputies, but if one of them is trained in this and works with those, the 5 out of the 15 in your facility, or you have a facility, that's larger, the size of the facility shouldn't matter. It's the investment into the people.
Yes.
So don't let your facility size deter you from doing this. Just think outside the box. And how can I take this concept and implement it into my 15-bed jail or my 1,500-bed jail? And I think you'll find that you certainly can do that. One of the things I think that you always have, as I sat in my chair as a sheriff and I had all kinds of good ideas come at me from my people, you certainly have to pick what you want to invest in. And one of the biggest things for me was benchmarks. What would you say in a program like this would you lay out as your initial benchmarks? Is it months? Is it years? Is it a semblance of both? What's your advice?
Yeah, as I was kind of talking about how to get started, depending on your facility size, like Paul was bringing up, that really dictates your availability, your housing space, and all that kind of thing. If you're in one of those categories where you're less than maybe 100 inmates in your facility, that's going to be really hard for you to dedicate an entire housing unit. So it might be just designing a program that happens once daily where these inmates come down to the program center, gym, classroom, whatever, and just has that one-on-one time with your IMC deputies. It could be as simple as that. But as benchmarks go, that could be your benchmark, creating that program class that could start introducing the case management aspect of the unit. And then after doing that for 6 months to a year, say, oh, these inmates are there's something a little different about those inmates that go to that program. Why is that? Because that's usually where I start to key up is like, why is this working over here? And so once you see that, then after that year, I really would call it a year. It's going to take some time and investing into those staff members that are going to be those main people working in there. Give it another year. Make sure everyone's on board. Make sure your administration's on board, and try to pull the next trigger for it. All right, this is working. Is it just increasing? Maybe another day we're doing this now to reach more inmates? Or is it now I'm ready to open up this housing unit? Or maybe it's half of a housing unit. There's certainly ways you can get creative with that. Maybe your bottom floor is your IMC unit and your top tier is just for general housing. Because that is another unique thing. Because then the top tier is going to see what's going on with that tier and be like, oh, maybe I want to be part of that. We're just blessed to be able to have an entire housing unit dedicated to it. So, those would be some of those main benchmarks, I think. Invest in your staff. I think that's probably your number one. Make sure your jail administration's on board and invest in your staff. Priority number one. And priority number two is going to be creating that initial class/program, if you don't have that housing unit, to just focus on that case management portion of things. Because once your deputies know how to do case management through your community corrections or whatever avenues you need to get them trained up, reach out to me. I'd love to share how we do that. Then your staff's ready to start those things. And once you get that ball rolling, I think that's where your success is going to start to happen.
Excellent excellent advice. And you hit one point here, and if it's all right with you, talking about putting you on the spot here right now, but and we'll put it up on the screen for you. Could you give out your email address? Would you be willing to do that?
Yep.
If you want to reach out to him directly. You have been so open about your program. And as we said, here he is right here. If you have any ideas, call him after or reach out to him. And what's your email address?
So I'm at jacob.schak, Schak, at co.dakota.mn.us. And I'm sure we can probably link it or put it on the...
We will. It'll be right at the bottom of the screen here. Feel free to reach out to the Sarge. It's how we all learn. It's how we all get better, as we learn from each other. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that, and thank you for helping your brothers and sisters out there get better, and we appreciate that.
Yep.
Well, let's talk money, because we all know that jails are on a budget.
Yep.
So what is the cost of something like this, a program like this?
So here's the cool thing. If you have a jail administration that is supportive of an IMC unit or even just jail programs in general, we are really blessed at Dakota County because all of the money we get from our inmate canteen, all that money is typically spent back on our inmates because it's their money anyways. And so for us at the Dakota County, we've typically never had to beg for money. when we bring in some of these contractors that are teaching decision points and moral cognizance therapy, and when I brought in DCTC, Dakota County Technical College, this last 6 months ago to teach their intro to entrepreneurship class, we were able to pay for it all because our inmates are the ones benefiting, and ultimately the community is the one that's benefiting because they're returning to the community. Let me say that one more time. When you invest into the inmate, the money, it's not only the inmate that's benefiting, it's the community that's benefiting. When they get back, they are set up hopefully for success, and then they are active participants in the community, helping build it up and no longer a burden. So I'm not going to throw out numbers at you. We don't have enough time for that either, but there has to be some money involved that jail administration, sheriff's office is willing to invest into it, and it usually is in the lines of the investment in your staff for the training components. As we all know, training can be expensive, but once you're willing to spend that money on your deputies, it just snowballs. You're going to see the results in your staff. They're going to be happier. They're going to be more trained. They're going to provide more effective programming. And everything, it just snowballs. It's amazing how that works. As far as like the housing unit as itself goes, you're already housing the inmates. That doesn't cost anything extra. You got to do that no matter what.
Right.
And so why not actually do something while they're there with them? If you asked me how much money I spent pre-COVID into the IMC unit and jail programs, so that was 2019, it was probably around $50,000 when it comes to like the contract investments for programming and bringing in those special classes and training and all that kind of. Training's a different budget anyways, because that comes through the sheriff's office. When it's specifically geared toward the inmate population, it was probably about $50,000.
And to put that into a perspective for our listeners, what's your total bed count and what's your average ADP?
Yep. So our pre-COVID, our average daily population was around 250. A little less because we actually house our females at Ramsey County Workhouse right now. And then our capacity is around 270. And our IMC unit, depending which housing unit it's in, is anywhere from 35 to 47 inmates at any given time.
Okay.
So,
and again, if you relate that to the business world, anytime you make an investment, when you look at that return on investment, well, our return on investment is that human behavior.
Yes.
And that contributing into society. And let's face it, that's what we do. That's that protect and serve that we do.
Yeah.
So great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice.
And I think, our sheriff's office over the years has been so supportive of the IMC unit and jail programs in general that, again, it hasn't been an issue for me, which I can't imagine for some of you listening to this that might be a hurdle. I've been blessed with our sheriffs that we've had, and Tim Leslie is completely on board with this. He loves jail programs. He loves what we do there. But I know for some of you it's hard, and so reach out to me. We can talk. There's creative ways that we can put it on paper to figure out how it makes sense.
Well, and going back to what you said in 2001, I'll guarantee you there wasn't a $50,000 investment at that time. It was a change of behavior and a thought process investment that's brought to you where you're at now 20, 21 years later of what that investment is. So like you said, reach out to you and talk about what are you thinking about doing and run it across a guy who's already been doing it. You'll find your answer. You'll find your way to make it work for you. Again, it's not the way, it's a way, and let's find a way for you guys to implement it into your facilities and into your organizations. And on that note, I also want to give another shout out here to because we're becoming kind of the end of part 2 here and the end of the show, and I want to get some final thoughts. Before I do that, I do want to say again, give a shout out to Sheriff Tim Leslie and his staff. Thank you, first of all, for allowing us to have Sergeant Schak with us for the 2 episodes and to share what you guys are doing. It's a team effort. Yeah, he gets to be the face. We don't have to turn you into a rock star, bud. You kind of already are one just with what you shared in this. And I just wanted to say thank you. You got a good one here, and we've met so many of your staff, and you've been so open. You always have allowed people to come in and see what you're all about. And so I want to give a shout out to Sheriff Leslie and all of his people for all that you do for the law enforcement community and for sharing Jacob's time with us today. So with that, we are coming to the end of part 2, which is kind of sad because there's so much more. We could sit here for days and talk about this, but I think we've teed it up to the point where I hope you all are grabbing onto this going, I want to make a difference, and I want to look into this some more, and they should reach out to you. So with that, any final thoughts, Sarge?
Yeah, and it's actually more geared towards just us as corrections officers and deputies and staff that work in a jail. Take care of yourselves. This job is stressful. There are days you don't want to do the job. There are days you want to quit. There are days you want to find something else to do. But then there are those days where that light bulb comes on. You see change happen. You see something great happen at work. You learn something new. The challenge happens where you become a better human. When we are in such a stressful environment and we're not taking care of ourselves, that stuff will boil up. Just very similar to military and any other law enforcement avenue you work in. You got to take care of yourself. Please take care of yourself. If you don't have an avenue to take care of yourself, reach out to me. You got my email. You got my phone. I'd love to talk with you about anything and everything.
You really are a rock star, and in this community, it's rough times right now, and we all do take care of each other, and your words of wisdom, nothing else needs to be said.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sarge.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate your guys' time also just for having me here. It's a huge message that we need to keep sharing and talking, and communication is huge. So.
Well, we'll keep that up, but I don't think this is going to be your last time here. You have a strong message, and we like to help deliver that message.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and email us at jailtalkpodcast@gmail.com.
Well, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you, Lauren. This was good. This was a fun one.
Yes, it was.
And we can't thank you enough for doing this. So
Absolutely.
We will be chatting with you all down the road. I'm Paul Laney.
And I'm Lauren Matthews.
And we'll see you next time on Jail Talk.